In the summer of 1940, the world witnessed something no one believed possible: the nation that had bled Germany into collapse in the First World War. The nation of Verdun, the Maginot Line, and centuries of military prestige fell in just 6 weeks. France, considered one of the strongest armies on earth, simply crumbled. And in Berlin, Adolf Hitler watched it happen with a mixture of disbelief, triumph, personal vindication, and something deeper, something that bordered on destiny in his own mind. For Hitler, the fall of France was not merely a military event. It was a psychological earthquake, a reversal of humiliation, and the moment he believed he had been chosen by fate to reshape Europe. To understand what Hitler said when France fell so fast in 1940, we must begin with the wound that shaped his worldview. Germany's defeat in the First World War haunted him like a personal scar. The Treaty of Versailles had not simply ended the war. It had humiliated Germany. It stripped its territories, limited its army, demanded impossible reparations, and placed the blame for the entire conflict solely on Germany's shoulders. Hitler, a former soldier who had lived through the chaos of 1918, never forgot the French army marching into German cities, or the French generals who dictated the terms of surrender. To him, France embodied national humiliation. From the moment he seized political power, Hitler fixated on France as Germany's primary enemy. He spoke frequently and obsessively about overturning the verdict of 1918. He insisted that Germany must one day settle accounts. Yet even he did not expect what would unfold in 1940. He believed France would collapse eventually, but not instantly. Not in only 42 days. Not before Germany had fully mobilized. Not with the Wehrmacht still untested against a major Western power. The planning for the invasion of France in 1940 began with cautious ideas from the German High Command. WHO feared a repeat of the trench warfare of World War I. Many generals suggested slow, methodical advances. But it was General Erich von Manstein who proposed something radically different. A daring armored thrust through the Ardennes forest terrain that French intelligence believed was too dense and too rugged for tanks. The French High Command had left this region minimally defended, assuming nature itself would protect it. When Hitler read Manstein's plan, he reacted instantly. Here was the kind of audacity he admired. He reportedly said the plan spoke directly to his instincts. Risky, unexpected, and psychologically devastating, exactly what he believed modern war required. Manstein's sickle cut would become one of the most famous operational concepts in history. On May 10, 1940, Germany launched the invasion. In the early hours, waves of Luftwaffe aircraft streamed over Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. Hitler was in Berlin, pacing restlessly as the first reports arrived. He was animated, almost trembling with anticipation. Witnesses recalled him saying that the French did not understand what was happening, and he seemed delighted by how quickly German paratroopers seized strategic points. But he had no idea just how fast events would move. Within 48 hours, German armored divisions were rolling through the Ardennes faster than French commanders believed physically possible. The roads were clogged with French refugees, military convoys collided in confusion, and communication lines broke. Hitler received reports of French panic and disarray. He reportedly grew excited, even jubilant. One of his adjutants later wrote that Hitler could hardly believe France was reacting so slowly. The decisive moment came at Sedan, where German troops forced the Meuse River crossing in a single day, an achievement that shocked the French High Command. Hitler stayed awake through the night, chain-smoking cigars, pacing as updates arrived. When he heard that the French line had collapsed at Sedan, he said quietly, "It's happening faster than I ever dreamed." Then he straightened, energized, and commanded his generals, "Push relentlessly." As German armor burst through the shattered French defenses, Hitler realized something extraordinary was unfolding. French divisions were surrendering or fleeing with minimal resistance. Entire sectors collapsed without cohesive defense. The British Expeditionary Force found itself cut off from the French army within days. Hitler's headquarters could barely process the pace of victory. One general phoned in and reported, "The French front is collapsing everywhere." Hitler replied, "Then exploit it. Their army is broken." His words revealed his mindset, not surprised, but triumphant, as if history had finally corrected itself. The man who had once lived in the trenches, humiliated by Versailles, now believed that fate itself was reversing the dishonor of 1918. By late May, German armored divisions reached the English Channel. The Allies were encircled in northern France. The British would scramble to evacuate at Dunkirk, but in Hitler's mind, the decisive blow had already been struck. During this period, he spoke often about the weakness of the French spirit, convinced their collapse showed they had lost their edge as a great power. Whether or not this was accurate militarily, it shaped Hitler's expanding belief that he possessed intuitive military genius. On June 13, the French government abandoned Paris and declared it an open city, hoping to spare it from destruction. When Hitler learned Paris would fall without street fighting, he paused and said, "Paris has fallen without a fight." Extraordinary. To him, this confirmed that France was no longer the rival it once had been. He added, with unmistakable satisfaction, "France is no longer a great power." These were not words of gloating but of deep personal significance. He saw the fall of Paris as the symbolic end of the old post-Versailles order. 4 days later, France asked for an armistice. When the message arrived, Hitler stood silently as it was translated. He then walked slowly to a window, looked out and said, "So, it is over." According to General Jodl, Hitler remained quiet for a few moments, then added, "In 1918 they forced Germany to its knees. Now history has balanced the scales." His reaction was not triumphant shouting, rather a solemn awareness that, in his mind, destiny had finally corrected a historical injustice. He ordered that the armistice be signed not in Paris, not in Berlin, but at Compiègne, the exact spot where Germany had signed its 1918 surrender. The very railway carriage used to humiliate Germany would now humiliate France. Hitler wanted symbolism, spectacle, and psychological retribution. On June 21, 1940, Hitler arrived in the forest clearing at Compiègne. The French delegation waited in silence. Hitler inspected the site, pausing at the statues and monuments honoring Allied victory in the First World War. Witnesses saw him smile coldly. He reportedly murmured, "These monuments will no longer mock Germany." When he entered the railway carriage, he refused to sit. He spoke only a single sentence, "Germany is victorious once again." Then he walked out. His involvement in the ceremony lasted only minutes, but it accomplished everything he had envisioned: symbolic reversal, humiliation of France, and emotional vindication. Outside the carriage, as he walked back through the clearing, Hitler appeared deeply affected, perhaps the closest moment to visible emotion he ever displayed publicly. His staff later said it was the only time they saw him genuinely moved. For Hitler, France's defeat was the final erasure of Germany's humiliation in 1918. He saw himself not merely as a victorious leader, but as a figure chosen by history. In private discussions after the victory, Hitler's comments became even more revealing. He told his generals that the French were no longer a people of soldiers. He declared that the world now knew what Germany can achieve, and insisted that Britain would seek peace, since it could not stand alone. These assumptions were not just arrogance, they were the seeds of future disaster. Convinced that France's rapid collapse reflected his own strategic brilliance, Hitler began to disregard advice from professional generals. He believed victory validated his instincts, not the careful planning of his military staff. Several generals later wrote that after France, Hitler became increasingly difficult to persuade. He dismissed concerns, overruled warnings, and relied heavily on intuition. One general wrote that the fall of France was the moment he began to believe he could not be wrong. This belief would shape the catastrophic decisions to invade the Soviet Union, declare war on the United States, and refuse strategic withdrawals. The triumph of 1940 planted the arrogance that would ultimately destroy him. The fall of France remains one of history's most stunning military collapses, a rapid disintegration of a major power that reshaped Europe. Hitler saw it as destiny fulfilled, the culmination of decades of hatred, humiliation, and ambition. What he said during those weeks reveals a man who interpreted military victory as personal vengeance, who viewed success not as the result of planning but as proof of divine favor, and whose greatest triumph became the foundation of his eventual downfall. France collapsed quickly. Hitler exulted. But the same speed with which France fell would later be mirrored in the collapse of Hitler's own Reich, as overwhelming forces closed in from every direction. Victory in 1940 fed the overconfidence that doomed him, and the man who celebrated France's fall as destiny fulfilled would one day face a reversal even greater than the one he believed he had avenged.